Representative, please.
Will the chairman yield for a question, Mr. Speaker?
Chairman Abney, will you yield? He will yield. Proceed.
I'm sorry. Oh, not a problem. On the change to the state-owned properties, the number of tracks, the Fane Tower aspect of this, how many such tracts of property are there in the state that this would fall into?
You know, I don't. You want to take that question? I'm going to acquiesce to the state information.
I'll take this. I don't know the exact number of tracks that there are, but right now what this article applies for is only the 195 land. It creates the ability for other districts to be formed at a later date, but we're not doing that. We're only forming it for the 195 tonight.
And what are the requirements to form those districts? Is it just an act of the General Assembly?
Yes, it's spelled out right in the budget article. Yes, it is.
All right. Thank you, Leader.
You're welcome.
I'm going to stand in opposition to this article on local control. And again, thank you, Leader. On local control, crony capitalism, and picking winners and losers. On the crony capitalism, I don't think EB needs $20 million to build the tax credits to build their facility. I think there are a lot of people in this room who could find a really good use of that $20 million in sales tax credits and build RI credits. I believe they've got something along the lines of at least 10 years worth of contracts, and I don't think that facility is going anywhere anytime soon. And again, I just think that I could think of a couple of contractors in my district that could go a long way to getting some of that sales tax relief that we're providing this very large company. And again, they're not going anywhere. It's not as if they were going to jet the state like, you know, maybe a Hasbro or CVS may do in the future. But EB is going to be here for a while. And I don't see the reason why we're subsidizing them to $220 million. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respectfully rise in opposition to this article. I would not presume to come into Minority Leader Phillips' neck of the woods and dictate what he should do in his neighborhood, nor would I go to Whip Chippendale's neck of the woods and dictate what they should and should not build. I think for all of us who appreciate democracy, and to the builders, I'm very sorry, this has nothing to do with you. This has to do with the precedent that it sets. I think it's an ugly precedent to set to allow people from different neighborhoods who do not know the needs, who do not know the zoning, who do not know the requests of the public in that area at all, to come in and say, I know the mayor of this city said no, but I don't agree. It worries me very much when we decide to stick our fingers in every piece of the pie, right? Like a toddler, or like my toddler at least. It makes me very concerned that if we are willing to do this in the capital city with expressly not the permission of the capital city, that there's nothing to stop us from doing it in any other city. So this is a start, but just because it's not your backyard now doesn't mean it won't be next year. Thank you.
Representative Youichi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise in strong support of this article. Through this entire economic boom, look at our land in downtown Providence. All of that land is primed for development in one of the largest economic booms the country has ever seen. And it's still virtually vacant. We have a responsibility. We have 1 million people here. We're the size of counties in other states. We have a responsibility to take this city of Rhode Island and figure out what to do with it. And I've seen more and more in my time up here where we need to start looking and breaking the fiefdoms, the little things that exist that are stifling our growth. We have to make bold moves. We have made every attempt to allow local control to do the right thing, and yet we stand on the brink of blowing a huge project that's not asking for any taxpayer support. So this is why I feel very comfortable standing here in supporting this. The representative just brought up a corporation, Electric Boat. Electric Boat is one of the largest employers, is on track to hire thousands of Rhode Islanders at blue-collar jobs. To do that, they have to remain cost competitive. We are in constant competition with neighboring states and states in other parts of the country. I know of one state that offered a major corporation $90 million to move, to expand its facility and put 500 blue-collar jobs there. We can't compete at that level to give them $30 million in cash, $30 million in credits, and then $30 million over 10 years or something. We can't compete at that level. We have to rely on our strengths, our location, our talent, our educated workforce. So we need to do a blend of things in order to do that. One is to limit the amount that locals can go in and stymie projects, because people just don't want to spend their money here. It's easy to leave. Two, we have to make it attractive and give the right credits. And three, we have to invest in our education. If we do those things, we can attract and retain those businesses. I don't disagree we should do more. And in this budget, we are clipping the wings of commerce. We're doing a lot to limit some of the things that aren't working because it doesn't. But I can't sit here and let us besmirch the name of Electric Boat, who is the brightest spot for the employment of blue-collar workers in this state that are going to be generational jobs. We're changing people's lives there. And to give them the tax grants they need, we need to do that. So I understand, I would love to see it go to different folks and smaller businesses, and maybe after we kind of straighten commerce out this time, we can look to see if we can deploy resources. But I cannot stand here and listen to us, one, say we shouldn't ruffle the feathers of the locals because they might not be happy with the planning and the way things are, or two, do anything to speak about any of our large corporations in this state. Because without those large corporations, they don't have employees who are hiring the carpenters, who are going off to work at to buy things at the florist or the coffee shop or the restaurants, because they're the ones who are paying the big payroll taxes and employing people. We need to be open to large employers. We need to be open to large developments. And we as a legislature need to be responsive and provide the tools to do that. So with that, I ask you to please support this article. Thank you.
Representative Place.
I want to thank Representative Youichi for worrying about machinists and, my fellow machinists like me and all the other guys that do this kind of work every day. But again, do you know what it would cost to move that facility somewhere else? I don't know if there's a state in this country that could afford the tax incentives to get them to move that facility. So why are we, again, I ask, why are we giving them this money? I just don't see the need. They're not going to go anywhere. They don't have to be competitive because they have the contracts going out 10 and 15 years. There's no competition involved. They have a monopoly on the submarines. So again, why are we giving this multi-billion-dollar corporation $20 million? $20 million is a pittance to them. I've seen some of the parts that they're required to go into these submarines. $20 million is not a lot of money to them, but to the citizens of this state, $20 million makes a big difference. I've seen the stuff. I've been at the other manufacturers that make the parts for those submarines. $20 million doesn't buy a whole lot to them, but it does buy a lot. $20 million does buy a lot to the rest of the people in this state. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fogerty.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm all about economic development. I've worked for several corporations, one with Representative Youichi back there. He left us, but I'm still there. And I just want to say that, you know, this is geared towards Providence, but it could be any other city and town. So I'm just saying, like, I have 20 acres of state property that, you know, along with the university. And I think that it's a matter of just saying, you know, not to just take it away from locals. I just say that consider locals, because, you know, you take things away, it becomes less restrictive. You're using city or town's infrastructures, which cost money. You know, and then there's no pilot programs that are put in place sometimes with these, and then the city has to pick up a tab on some of the roads. So again, cities and towns have their comp plans. They have them for a reason. Don't just wipe them away for big corporation and economic development. It's a balance that we have to keep Rhode Island, you know, the sense of place that we live in. So I'm just saying, balance of both. Again, working for corporations and then also working on putting comp plans together. It's got to be a balance and not running over one for the other. Thank you.
Representative Kislak.
Hi, yes, thank you. I rise in opposition to this article. I was going to request that the article be divided, but now that we've passed this amendment, it appears that parts of the article that I am concerned about and specific incentives for projects that I'm opposed to are throughout the article, so I must rise in opposition to the whole thing. I was going to ask to divide what was Section 9, but is now Section 8, which was specifically the part of the article that abrogates the independence of our cities and towns. And Representative Youichi spoke about the city of Rhode Island, and I think that's an incredibly valid conversation for us to have. But so long as we believe in our cities and towns, zoning and oversight is a key function of our cities and towns. I believe in local authority. This abrogates the city's local authority. It is specifically in reaction to a local conversation about whether to build a particular building and whether Providence should grant spot zoning for a property on the 195 land. The City Council ultimately voted to allow that anyway. While I opposed that decision, the local process worked it through. And that is why I rise in opposition to this article as an abrogation of local authority. Thank you.
Representative Phillips.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise in strong support of this article. And in response to Representative Place's comment that electric boat won't move, just a few years ago, maybe 20 years ago, the town of Framingham tried to hold hostage General Motors after they built a brand new paint plant there to complete the vehicles. Guess what? They shut the whole thing down. Framingham has been trying to rebuild ever since, and a significant portion of those jobs were Rhode Islanders. So don't say that electric boat won't move. They very well could. They have the money all around the country to move. So I'm very much in support of this article. Thank you, Speaker.
Representative Speakman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the chairman, please, if he will yield.
He will yield. Proceed.
Thank you. My question is about the composition of the district commission, right behind you. As I read it on page 12, the General Assembly creates these special economic development districts, and each district is governed by 7 members, appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the Senate. I can't find any language that gives the municipality any participation in these commissions, nor this body, members of this body. Am I reading that correctly?
Leader Shikachi.
Thank you. I'd like to answer. You are correct. The municipalities will have no role in the selection of who the membership of these district committees are. But I would like to point out for you and everybody that does not mean that the neighboring people or even the municipality is shut out from the process. They're shut out of the appointment process, but they still participate in the permitting process. They still reserve all their rights under the state enabling legislation. If you read through the rest of the article in this particular section, they still have the right to a hearing, they still have a right to notice, they still have a right to be heard, and they have, most importantly, they have a right to an appeal. So what's happening with this legislation is we're not bypassing the public or the neighbors that you're going to wake up one morning and find a business or a building next door to you. You'll get notice, you can be heard, you can retain counsel, you can bring your own experts, you can make any kind of recommendations or make any kind of comments before the board, and then, if you're not happy with it, you can appeal to the Superior Court. All that language is current existing law under the state enabling legislation for zoning. That will remain. Excuse me, it's been a long night. That will remain, and what will happen as we go forward is we are replacing the local board where these arguments are made, again, only for state-owned land. Let's make clear, this is not being used for private land. This is not being used for city and town land. This is being used for state land. And I will tell you this, Representative Speakman, in my private practice, 15 years ago, I represented the Supreme Court. They wanted to build a new courthouse in Warwick. They had very clear case law, not statutory law, that the state is exempt from all local control. Now, it was never codified in state statute, and I think a lot of people were afraid to do it, but an argument, a very clear argument could be made, and was made by then Chief Justice Williams at the time, that I don't need local zoning control. But at the end of the day, he did submit to the Warwick Zoning Board. It was unanimously approved. The point I'm making is there's a body of law, case law, that this already exists. Because it's state-owned land, they're exempt from local zoning control. Nevertheless, we are now doing today is codifying that belief in state statute. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Leader. I'd feel much more comfortable with this if the municipality had a seat at the table on these commissions.
I understand that. I'm not the prime sponsor of this. My guess, and it's an educated guess, is unfortunately some cities and towns have had all the seats at the table and they haven't acted in a fair manner or an expeditious manner, and that's why they're, we feel from a state perspective they don't deserve it anymore because they haven't exercised it fairly. And unfortunately, what most people don't realize is when you go before a zoning board, a planning board, or a city council in this capacity, even though it's a legislative body, it is really acting in a quasi-judicial capacity. You're supposed to be judge-like under the Administrative Procedures Act, and unfortunately they don't. And that's probably, we're all guilty of that. You exercise local control, you have to run in a local election every 2 years, every 4 years, but you really should realize that in that capacity, you're acting in a quasi-judicial one, and you need to act a little bit more neutral.
Thank you, Leader. As a former member of a town council and a planning board, I have problems with that approach. Thank you.
I am sure you would, but thank you very much, Representative Speakman.
Representative Carson.
Yeah, I have a question as well. I don't know who it should go to you? I think I'm asking about the same area of the article that Representative Speakman was talking about. So if we look at page 21, it says that the purposes stated here, the General Assembly may, by statute, establish, designate, lay out, and define as special economic district. So how would we do that? What would be the mechanism for the Assembly to do this? Would it be that...
A bill.
So a bill would come from one of us
Yes.
to establish a commission someplace.
Or, at the request of a department, just like we do bills all day. Yes, but let's just say the city of Newport would like Chairman Abney or yourself to introduce a bill to create one in the city of Newport to handle, some state-owned land, 20 acres of state-owned land there.
So if I could just get a little bit more specific in that, in the way you envision this happening, would it only be municipalities that would ask for us to introduce this enabling legislation? Could it be private sector people that ask? Could it be, who might be the other parties that would ask us to establish it? The types of parties?
Just like we do bills now, we could put one in at the request of a private citizen. It could be a state department. It could be commerce. It could be economic development. It could be a private party. It could be the municipality. It could be anybody, because remember, we are a citizen legislature and anybody can ask. So in theory, anybody can ask for a bill.
Right. I'm okay with the municipality asking me to do that. I'm not sure I'm happy with a private party asking me to do that. You know, that's the part that
okay.
I'm unsettled with.
It's not a conversation. Everybody just address the chair, and questions are fine, but we're not going to have conversations back and forth. Thank you both. Representative Jello.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, I've heard some words today and I've read some words in this article that I find kind of concerning because I think they're aimed at my city. Fairly, eccentric, redundant disapprovals. There was a lot of attention to the proposed Fain Tower, or Mr. Fain called it the Hope Tower. The tower is significantly taller than anything in the neighborhood, anything proposed for the neighborhood. It went through a process of zoning board looking at it, planning board looking at it, design review commission. There were no's all along the way, over a period of months. It was a long, painful period for people in the neighborhood and in the city of Providence watching this discussion go on and on and on. Ultimately, the city council overruled and approved the development of the Fain Tower, and then the mayor vetoed that approval, and the city council overruled the mayor's veto. So the Fain Tower is now good to go. We don't need this commission to get the Fain Tower going. To the best of my knowledge, no other developer has requested to do something in that area and run into trouble with those agencies of Providence government. To the best of my knowledge, the Fain Tower, or the Hope Tower, is the only development effort that ran into this kind of trouble with every agency except the city council. But it's on the road now. We don't need it for that. It's alarming to me that a small number of folks, just 7 on this proposed commission, will be replacing the efforts, the wisdom, the local knowledge of planners, zoning board members, the comprehensive plan of the city, city councilors, and the mayor, in my case, Providence. 7 people are going to replace those decision makers, this district, the city of Providence today. Who knows where it would be next year at this time? That 7 people would come in and be able to make decisions instead of the locals, who are not necessarily eccentric. They're not delaying just for the point of being delaying. They're delaying because they're concerned because this design doesn't fit this space in our city. Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned about this 7-member commission making the decision, but I'm even more concerned about language on page 23 that allows 3 members of that commission to make the decision.
Representative Ruggiero.
Thank you, Speaker. I understand and appreciate
the sentiments of so many of my colleagues, especially those in Providence, and no one knows their district better than themselves. And it is a little worrisome that we could be usurping local decision-making. My question is I would like to know if this is divisible with Section 9, the economic districts section being divided separately, because the rest of the article is about economic development and some programs that I believe are really, really important for the state of Rhode Island. But out of deference, to my colleagues and the fact that I do agree that I hate to abdicate local authority totally to the state of Rhode Island, Mr. Speaker, is Section 9 divisible, please? Thank you.
Section 9 must be combined with Section 8.
Okay.
And that would be divisible. Is that your request?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, because that would then leave intact all of the economic development programs that are important to the state of Rhode Island, but allows us to just vote separately on those two sections. Thank you for that.
Leader Philippi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hello.
Leader Philippi.
Testing. Or can I take your mic?
Hello? All right, there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's in and out. Can I pull up yours?
You can use mine, clerk. All right, you're all set. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I think they're telling you something.
Mine's, hey, there you go.
There you go. All right.
Hello. Okay.
You'll be glad to know that when we finally adjourn, the technology in both this House and the Senate will be totally upgraded.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I look forward to that. For the 5 years I've been up here, Mr. Speaker, I felt like foghorn leghorn, walking around the building, local control, municipal sovereignty, municipal sovereignty. First we took local planning with comprehensive permits. No one in Providence objected. And then we took away the ability to exclude land with steep slopes from developable area. And then we took away the buffers around wetlands from the exclusion for developable areas. And then we made it so on the coast, we're going to exclude base flood elevation and freeboard. No one from Providence objected. I think the way Providence has treated Jason Fain has been problematic. I feel they should have rolled out the red carpet for him and said, thank you for wanting to invest $300 million in the city. I didn't like what Providence did. This is not the way to fix it. The chickens have come home to roost. The chickens have come home to roost on this. This sets a horrible precedent. What's next? We need to respect local sovereignty. I'm sorry it's come to this point. I wish many people who are objecting now saw this in the preceding 5 years and stood with some of us who respected local control, because this is the culmination of it. Thank you.